Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and ting and ting and ting. Back with some more vibes for you. I'm the giant, man. I hope you guys are doing alright out there. And you can tell by my eyes, I'm a little bit, I just got off work and ting, and I decided, I want to watch some videos and ting to simmer down a little bit, you know what I mean? So I keep hearing about the Ottoman Empire. And so we're going to watch something on the Ottoman Empire. It's part 1. But before I can go on there, let me say this here. I've been uploading daily for over 6 months now. So I'm going to cut back a little bit and just do it 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, same time, 6 p.m. But I have some other projects that I'm doing, and I need a couple of days, to work on them and ting. So it's gonna be 5 days a week, 6 p.m. as usual, instead of 7 days a week. So let's get into this. Let's get into this Ottoman Empire thing, because I've been really looking forward to do it. Reading up about the Ottoman Empire. Let me fix the mic up a little bit here and thing. Anyway, this one is called Ottoman Empire series Rise and Fall. Osman and the Rise of the Ottomans, Part 1. Let's YouTube and simmer.
Your dear forehead is like a broad open field, your eyes like 2 glowing jewels, your mane like rich brocade, your ears are like twin brothers, your back brings a man to his heart's desire. I shall not call you horse, but brother, better than any brother. From the heroic tales of the Oghuz Turks. In this series, we will look at the Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful empires to have existed in the last 1,000 years. Each episode will cover one or more of the rulers that helped shape the empire for better or worse. We start the series with the conditions that gave rise to Ottoman founder Osman the First, a man whose life was never documented to the level of detail of that of his descendants. A man whose life is shrouded in few facts and many myths, myths that have given rise to legend. But one fact is crystal clear. He laid the foundation for his son and others to build an empire that would instill a combination of fear, awe, and wonder into Christian Europe. We will cover the empire's military expansion, their victories, their losses, which were not just troop losses or territorial, but also included one of their sultans and his son. We will also examine the diversity of the imperial court, as the concept and reality of bloodlines and of what being Turkish meant are not as clearly defined as one might think. For example, the Ottomans themselves had no concept of the term Turkish. That would be a later creation. Lastly, we will examine the accomplishments of the Ottomans in terms of technological innovations, architecture, and art.
Ooh,
their experiment in empire would last 623 years, ending only formally in the previous 20th century, but the seeds of that decline started much earlier. As a result, they would outlast, even if barely, some rivals of theirs like the Habsburgs, Safavids, and Imperial Russia. What were the events and conditions that gave rise to this empire? Much of their founding is shrouded in the unknown and lost to the shifting sands of time. Attempts to provide historical context only being first applied a century after its founder's death, not during his lifetime. Contemporary accounts, therefore, of the man are scarce. To understand the rise, we need to go back to the 9th century and the Seljuk Dynasties. They were a dynasty of nomadic Oghuz Turks hailing from the steppes of Central Asia and Outer Mongolia. In the late 9th century, Turkic mercenaries encountered the Western Muslim dynasties, causing many of their numbers to convert to the Islamic faith. By the 11th century, conditions had changed and the Oghuz horsemen would descend upon the eastern reaches of Anatolia in a bid to claim land of their own. They would loot and plunder their way to the borders of what was left of the once mighty Roman Empire that we now refer to academically as Byzantium. They would sweep into the
Byzantium.
lands of Persia and help form the Seljuk Empire that would control land from the shores east of the Bosporus to what is now Pakistan, and up to the lands that their forefathers had first crossed over. There would be an exchange of culture between the Turkic invaders and Persians that would flow both ways and shape the face of many of the countries now in the region today. Events between the Byzantine
See, I always talk about how things changes, and the different groups come in, and they sort of meshed with people that are there and create a different sort of culture, but with some roots based in whoever created that civilization from that mixture of people. Always happening, and these days people are fighting immigration, and they don't want nobody coming there to their countries and stuff like that. And I mean, even my little island, I know the island next to my Trinidad, all of a sudden we were able to travel freely to them, and during the War Revolution they said no, you need a visa to come there, making it even harder to go there, even though the two islands were rooted in the same culture, and but things are ever changing. I wonder if people fought that change, and they fought to, I guess they did, I guess it would be human nature to do that, but let's continue.
Empire and Seljuks would culminate at the Battle of Manzakurt, where the Sultan Alp Arslan of the Seljuk Empire would face the Roman Emperor Romanos the Fourth. He would not only win the battle, but capture the emperor. This would be the spark from which these lands would be forever transformed. The Turks would, as a result of Byzantines fleeing their lands, move in and occupy them. Their base at Nicaea would soon be joined in 1096 by Jerusalem, which would find itself as part of the Seljuk domains. They would also help usher in the Crusades, as Pope Urban II, shocked at these events, would call for a crusade to attempt to liberate the Holy Lands. And in a twist of future irony, the Crusades would further weaken the Byzantines and set them up for a series of future encounters with the Turks. The Seljuks would be repelled from Nicaea and return to Anatolia, where they would annex much of the Anatolian Turkic lands and eventually break away from their Iranian counterparts, becoming instead the Seljuks of Rum. The Byzantines would attempt again in 1176 to lay claim to what they felt were their lands. However, the Sultan Kiliz Arslan II...
See, look at all the names of places there. It's all different now. You know what I mean? And if you notice, there's a lot of new countries named. Some go back to the old, some name something new. I know Africa had a lot of change. Like, let me see, which one? Rhodesia. Changed, because I remember Rhodesia when I was a kid, but kids these days don't remember that. The change happened. They changed the name. I would like to go back and check the names of countries and sort of correlate them to the areas. Or did the people who come in just rename those places? Well, yeah, they did. They come in and rename those places to suit themselves. But let's continue. That's why I like learning about history, because you could see the changes, and from a sociological perspective, you could see the cultures change and stuff, some slightly and some completely.
And would defeat his counterpart, the Emperor Emmanuel's armies in the southwest of Anatolia. This would give the Turks an open pathway to the Anatolian coast, which would in turn increase their fortunes by providing additional trade routes. In the 1200s, they would establish a peace with what was an even smaller footprint of Byzantine holdings, but it would be but a temporary measure, as a storm was brewing in the east. The empire they had split from a region now referred to as Khwarezmia was swept over by the Mongol hordes of Chinggis Khan. Everything in their path, people, buildings alike, razed to the ground in a fury the likes of which the region had not ever experienced. The Seljuks would attempt to, at first, ignore the threat of the Mongols and continue the building of infrastructure. But by 1243, the pressures would be too much, and they would suffer a loss to the Mongols that would result in them becoming a vassal state of the Great Khanate. A decade later, the Mongol Empire itself would begin to fragment, and infighting among Seljuks and Mongols would leave behind a series of Turkic beyliks, who were free to determine their own fate. From this chaos, one tribe in the northwest region, led by its warrior chief, would emerge to create a new order in the region. His name was Osman, and as mentioned earlier, his life shrouded by myths created where few facts and fiction collide. There is no argument, however, that he was the leader that would initiate the founding of an empire by his same name. He was said to have killed his own uncle after his father's death. His followers were not strictly speaking just free Turkic warriors. They also consisted of nomads, slaves, monks, and other displaced peoples. To this ragtag grouping of people he promised land and plunder. However, he was quick to ensure his authority and rule would form the foundation of all future actions, including dissent, which he dealt with quickly and ruthlessly. Osman would conquer many of the neighboring tribes and grow his territory, but it is said he turned his gaze towards Constantinople and the southeastern European lands that lay beyond, feeling they were ripe for the taking, given how fragmented and weak he felt they had become. There's also a fictional story that appears in the late 15th century work of Asiki that says, Osman had a dream while sleeping in the house of a holy sheikh by the name of Edebali. It was said in the dream, Osman envisioned a bright crescent moon rising from Edebali's breast and sinking into his own before a tree sprouted from his navel to cover all the world. Upon awakening, he relayed the dream to Edebali, who told him that God had given him the imperial station for he and his descendants. Assisting the Ottomans was the Byzantine Emperor Mikhail Palaiologos. Before his recapture of Constantinople, a group of Byzantine soldiers called the Akriti protected the eastern lands almost as mercenaries, as they did so in exchange for tax exemptions and the ability to raid neighboring tribes outside of what was left of the empire's holdings. However, upon recapturing Constantinople, the emperor would disband the Akriti, pulling them instead into the main army's body, and so the damage would be done. The last protection that the empire experienced outside the city's walls were effectively removed, and the Turks wasted no time in moving in. Many of the former Akriti, bitter over the disbanding, joined the Ottomans' banner. Osman would next make his way north, taking the last few eastern Byzantine vassal lands. His forces were mainly light armored,
a lot of conquering going on back
mounted
then.
archers who used various tactics to encircle and demoralize their enemies. The Seljuk Turks faced their own political rivalry with the Fatimids in Egypt. Osman thus felt he was ready to remove the influence of the Seljuk Turks, who his father had been all but too happy to serve. And in its place, he hoped to build a new and independent Turkish kingdom. Information on his immediate family is almost non-existent. We know with certainty that he had at least one son, and we know he likely had 2 marriages. It's also fairly certain that his son who would succeed him, Orhan, was from his first marriage. Next, Osman would enter the city of Eskişehir and seize a castle by the name of Karakahisar Castle. Sources say that he granted homes to settlers from various provinces. He next took the town of Yenisir, the so-called New City, where he built more homes for his men and made it his capital. Osman and his nomadic people would put down roots that would over time form the solid foundation from which his descendants would go on to conquer the region. Domestication, however, would not completely change their nomadic ways, at least not initially, and certainly not with regards to combat. As mentioned earlier, they still battled as people of the steppes. Nowhere was this more evident than the upcoming battle against the Byzantines. Osman had failed to take Nicaea, but this would set him up for a direct battle against the Byzantines, called the Battle of Bathus. Near the shore of the Sea of Marmara, he would study the lay of the land and deploy his mounted archers to devastating effect. He had with him the same ragtag army. While the exact place of the battle is unknown, it would have likely been within sight of the city of Nicomedia. On the 27th of July in 1302, Osman's 5,000 light cavalry met the 2,000 Byzantines in battle. Osman's troops would have been a combination of his own and allies from the Turkish tribes of the region, such as the Pelagonia and those that inhabited the Meander River. The Byzantine army represented their reduced prominence. They could barely muster 2,000 men, and half of those were mercenaries, Alan mercenaries, who, for uncertain reasons, did not even directly participate in the battle. The battle initiated with a charge by Osman's Turkish cavalry directly towards the smaller Byzantine army. They collided, and after but a brief clash, the Turks broke the Byzantine forward line, penetrating deep and forcing Muzalan to withdraw to the nearby city under the cover of the Alan force. The result of Osman's victory is that his prestige in the eyes of many contemporary leaders would be raised. They would take notice. In addition, many other Turks and even Christian sympathizers would flock to his banner. He would next advance yet even closer to the coast. Along the way, he seized town after Byzantine town, in addition to forts and villages, effectively severing communication between Nicaea and Nicomedia. With his now larger army, he was able to conquer all of Bithynia's countryside, leaving only their major cities. The impact of this was to choke the Byzantine economy, particularly overland trade, almost into submission. The Byzantine response was not to pick up sword and shield against Osman. Instead, the Emperor Andronicus II shocked many by offering a royal princess to Osman's, in theory, overlords, the Ilkhanid Khan, based in Iran.
They just gave away women,
would offer him no support, nor would the Spanish mercenary band, the Catalan Grand Company, who instead invited the Turks to assist them in raiding the Balkans. The emperor finally turned to the Kingdom of Serbia, who accepted an alliance, but by then even most of the local peasants had been swayed over to Osman's banner. Osman continued his military push west of the Sakarya River until he reached the port of Mudanya. This had the effect of again cutting off an overland trade and lifeline route for the Byzantines to their city of Bursa. In his lifetime, Osman was unable to take the city of Bursa, despite having it be a priority for him in his final years. Nor was he able to take the city of Nicaea, but the towns and villages of the surrounding territory did fall to him and would provide him with much needed agricultural benefits in addition to more coinage. He desired to again attempt to capture Bursa, but it would elude him. For his son, though, it would not, for his son would fulfill his vision. In the year 1323, Osman would die, but he succeeded in not only expanding his tribe's lands and possessions, but he left his son with a formidable fighting force and territory to rule over and to expand from, which we will cover in the next episode of the rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire. I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button, and if you enjoy the content and haven't yet, please consider subscribing. Love to have you on board. Till the next video, cheers.
Man, that is some cool stuff there. I am ready to watch the rest of this. I am totally ready to watch the rest of this. This is going to be quite interesting. You know what I mean? I don't know why the Ottomans seem to have intrigued me so much. Maybe it's because of so much of the comments that I got talking about the Ottomans. So, you know, I hope you guys join me. I'm going to leave a link in the description to this video so y'all can go check it out for yourself and ting. You know, it's pretty cool. All right, listen, I'm going to get off of here. Y'all take care of each other, all right? Cool runnings.